Anna here, and today I wanted to go over the books that I read in February. If you're looking for somebody that read 30 books in 1 month, I am sorry to disappoint you, but I did read quite a few books and I wanted to go over the ones that I read, kind of tell you about them, which ones I loved, which ones I was on. So let's just get into it, okay? Also, wait, before we begin, I just wanted to thank you if you guys have downloaded any of my stories. I just looked and I have like over 1,100 downloads in like 20 different countries. If you didn't know, my original fiction is always linked below. And so I was curious if you guys listen to that. First of all, thank you. But also, do you guys want a monthly story? I wasn't really uploading on there because I was working on a bigger writing project, but if you guys are interested and you guys have downloaded my stories and listened to them, please leave a comment and let me know down below. I go back and forth. I don't really know if I should keep uploading there or if I should wait. I don't know. So just let me know in the comments down below. But otherwise, I just wanted to say thank you for anybody who has given my original fiction a download, a listen. I really do appreciate it. But anyways, let's get on to this. Also, I know my schedule hasn't been super consistent. I've had some computer issues, but I think everything's fixed now. So I will be uploading Tuesdays and Thursdays from now on. But because everything got a little bit mixed up, I'll be uploading this Sunday and then back to Tuesdays and Thursdays. So let's get started. So the first book that I read this month was Fiona Barton's The Widow. This book was about a widow, a woman whose husband had recently passed away. He was actually the main suspect in a child abduction case, but he was acquitted of his crimes. He had passed away unexpectedly, and now the press are kind of pushing the widow to kind of come forward and make a statement. Everybody wants to know what actually happened, if she knew anything about the story. It's a really interesting book. I loved that it gave you different perspectives. So you have the perspective of the mom whose daughter went missing, you have this perspective of the widow, of the detective, of the press, and it goes back and forth in time, which can be a little confusing. I had to flip back to make sure I was on the right timeline, but you know, that's not any issue with the writing. That was just, you know, me. I thought it was really cool. I really much so enjoyed it. It's a very mild thriller, definitely not high intensity or anything like that. I think my favorite part of the book was the fact that kind of all the evidence around the husband was quite circumstantial. And you think about that and you're like, there's no way that people are arrested on evidence that is that circumstantial, but that's kind of all you get. I mean, unless somebody signs their name on the crime, a lot of evidence is quite circumstantial. And so I thought that aspect of it was really interesting, was kind of the detective really trying hard to piece together what happened and the husband just being like, I didn't do it. It's also interesting because of the characters. You kind of like some characters and dislike others in the beginning. The widow you kind of feel for. She's very overly obsessed with her husband's innocence and proclaiming his innocence to people, but you also see how she's been manipulated by him for so long, so you do have sympathy for her, and then you see how hard the press is pushing her, and so that makes you not like them as much. But then as the story evolves, you kind of don't like the people that you started to like, and then vice versa. It's very interesting. So I like it. I thought it was a great ending. I thought it was interesting, a very mild read, kept me entertained the whole time. I mean, I would recommend if you guys see this at your local bookstore, why not? The next one that I read, so this one was a novella. I read The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. This is actually what, well, I read it because it's what The Haunting of Bly Manor was based off of, the TV show on Netflix. So I will do a separate video kind of comparing and contrasting the two, but I did read this one. If you have watched the show, it's pretty much like the show. It's about a nanny who goes to take care of 2 children and she starts seeing ghosts there. The rest unfolds from there. So I'll go into more detail in that video specifically, but I wanted to say that it was quite hard to get through. So let me just read you the very first sentence of this. This is one sentence, one period, just one, okay? This is the first sentence in the entire story. It says, "The story that held us around the fire, sufficiently breathless, but except the obvious remark that it was gruesome, as on Christmas Eve, in an old house, a strange tale should especially be. I remember no comment uttered till somebody happened to know it as the only case he had met in which such a visitation had fallen a child." So these long, like, run-on sentences are throughout the story, and it made it really challenging for me to get through, if I'm just to be completely honest. It wasn't my favorite writing style, but I really did like the story. The whole you know, gothic haunted house type story. It was so fun. This, I believe, was written in 1898. So kind of like a fundamental, you know, gothic horror story. So I did love reading that genre, but it was quite challenging to get through. Like I said, it's a novella. I think it's only like 100, 150 pages, but it was quite hard to get through. The next thing that I read was Clive Barker's Cabal. So this is a Clive Barker book, but this one was interesting. Not at all what I expected, especially from reading his other works. This one was more action-packed, and it's essentially about a man who has been told that he has committed horrible crimes. He's murdered a bunch of families, and he doesn't remember doing it, but he is told that he has by somebody that he trusts, so he thinks that it must be true. He finds these people who tell him that there's like a group of people called the Nightbreed, so he decides that he wants to join them. He goes to where the Nightbreed is located. He actually gets bit by one and turns into one himself. However, he betrays the Nightbreed. They're like kind of underground demonic, what's the word? Shapeshifters. He kind of betrays them by going above ground to help his girlfriend who came looking for him. In doing so, the humans come to attack the Nightbreed, and it's like this full-on war between the humans and shapeshifters, and their town is kind of broken up, and then he is turned into Cabal and told that he has the responsibility now to gather all of the Nightbreed and to find a safe haven for them. I was a little sad because, to my understanding, this has not, it left off on a cliffhanger like there would be a part 2, but to my understanding there has not been another part of this written. And so I was kind of disappointed because I had grown so attached to these characters. I wanted to see what actually happened. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that there is a second book or novella to this. But it is a film. It is called Nightbreed. It was directed by Clive Barker, and so I will be comparing this to that in a separate video as well. But this one, I think my favorite character, Clive Barker is just a literary genius, honestly. And there's this one character called the Mask, and he's, you know, a normal person, but he carries around a briefcase with a mask in it. And when he puts the mask on, he's a serial killer. And the mask is always talking to him like, put me on, you know you want to. It's so cool. I think it's one of my favorite characters, definitely that Clive Barker's ever written, but maybe ever. I absolutely loved the mask in this book. That was my favorite part. It wasn't my favorite Clive Barker book, but it was still very entertaining. I still loved it. It was still written very beautifully. I absolutely love Clive Barker. The next I read was my favorite book of the month. So I read The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. This one I loved. I thought this was so fun. It's about a girl who takes the train every day, and as the train kind of stops on the route, she looks up at this one specific street because that is that street that she used to live in with her husband. Her husband still lives there with his new wife and their child, and she's still very much so heartbroken about the whole ordeal. She has like definitely dependency issues on alcohol, and you do feel very sorry for her, but she definitely takes things to the extreme to where you're like, what are you doing a lot of the time? But anyways, she starts watching this other couple who lives a few doors down. She finds that that woman has gone missing, and then eventually that woman has turned up dead. So she kind of throws herself into figuring out what happened to the girl to kind of distract herself from her own issues, but also because she has seen some evidence that maybe nobody else is aware of from watching this woman each day on the train. It's a really interesting story. I will say that if you pay close enough attention, I think the big reveal at the end isn't such a big reveal, but I will say even though that part I figured out, there was still a whole nother layer on top of it that I didn't feel like I ruined the story by figuring out like the big ending. I thought that it was so well written. It was so entertaining. The characters were fantastic. You have this whole kind of character transformation from this woman who her life is out of control. She's just drinking constantly. She's binging. And then you see her kind of gain power through, you know, unfortunately someone else's demise, but you see her kind of gain power and realize that she is important and kind of change her entire way of thinking towards the end. This was definitely one of my favorite books that I read this year, definitely my favorite in February. So if you guys get a chance to read this, I highly suggest it. It's a thriller, it's fun, it's engaging. I loved the characters, highly recommend. The next book that I read was Shadow Man by Dennis Etchison. with cat hair in it, because if it's not covered in cat hair, then it's not from my house. And this book my husband had picked out a while ago. To me, it kind of seemed like a Slender Man type book, so I didn't read it for a while, but it turned out to be quite different. But there is kind of that legend aspect to it. It's about these children who keep going missing or turn up murdered in a town. The ones who are alive are just like petrified of this man without a face who is abducting these children. It's an interesting story. You have a man who comes in contact with a little boy and sees the little boy be abducted, so you kind of have his path in the story, but then you also follow the man who abducted the child, and then you follow his path of like what he does with the kid and where they go, and then eventually everything comes together in the end. It was very fast paced and would be a fantastic movie. I think it could be adapted for the screen very easily, and I think it would be really creepy, so I hope someone does that eventually. I will say the only thing that I kind of didn't love about it was how big the text was, and this seems like I'm being nitpicky, but it really was distracting. It felt like I was reading like a book for a 12-year-old, you know, when they just make the text really big. Like, I would much rather have just a shorter, smaller book. But not only was it the text, but the description. For example, there's a scene where these young boys accidentally murder someone. And they're just like, yeah, they murdered him, and then they went home. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean? Like, what are they feeling? What's going on? What's going through their head? Are they scared? Are they happy? Are they nervous? Like, no description. So I think because it was so fast paced that you didn't really get to dive heavily in character development, I didn't really feel a big connection to kind of anyone in the story. So if somebody did end up dying or being hurt, I didn't really care all that much. Although I don't know that that's necessarily an issue, because your main point of the whole story is this one child's safety. And I absolutely was interested in having that child be safe. I thought it was not the most well-written novel that I've ever read, but the plot I thought was fantastic, and I hope that eventually it does get made into a movie, because I just think that this would be so creepy and fun. So the last is not horror, it's not thriller, it's not anything, but I wanted to read something a little bit away from that. I didn't want to get burnt out on horror, which I'm not yet, but eventually that will happen. So I decided to read Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance. So it's just kind of like a short essay about self-reliance, about how you shouldn't follow the crowd, how you should have your own ideologies and your own way of thinking. And I just think it's a really important and powerful essay to read. If you'll humor me for a minute, I'd like to read you just a few of my favorite quotes. So this is one of just my favorite quotes ever, and it just happens to be in this, so I wanted to read it to you. It says, "Trust thyself, every heart vibrates to that iron string." But they're kind of broken down into chapters, and he talks about, you know, being self-reliant, having your own ideologies in relation to art, in relation to religion. Oh, this. "But the great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness and independence of solitude." You know, think for yourself. Don't just go with what everybody else is saying. If you don't know, Emerson is one of the transcendentalists, so he sees kind of like God through nature. And then there was one more quote. I won't read you the long ones because I tried to read my husband a few of these and he was like, oh, this one too. I loved this one. It says, "We live in the lap of immense intelligence, which makes us receivers of its truth and organs of its activity." Oh, I just love this. Emerson is such a great writer. I highly suggest if you just have an Emerson book lying around, Self-Reliance is just one of my favorite short essays. But anyways, those are the books that I read this February. Let me know, have you read any of these? Do any of these sound interesting to you? But most importantly of all, let me know what your favorite book that you read this month is. Thank you for always recommending great books for me to read as well. Yeah, that's my reading list. I will see you guys on Sunday, and then next week I have a book haul for you and some other fun stuff coming up. So stick around, and I will see you on Sunday with yet another horror video, my second channel, which will be linked down below with my original fiction, my Instagram, anything that you guys need. And I will see you soon with another horror video. Bye guys.